I'm going to have to hold your attention for just a little bit longer.
Okay.
I've got it back where I want, but now I have to go back and get my slides.
Okay.
So just hold on. I really apologize to you. I messed something up, and I'm not sure what I did, but I've got it where I want it to be. I just have to get these slides. And it's
Okay, that's fine.
going to take me just a couple of minutes to do this.
Okay.
Okay, I have one set of slides up, and I'm going to start with that. So we can begin to talk about what we need to talk about. And again, I apologize for the delay. And when we take a break, I'll get the other set of slides up. So we have here introduction to organizational behavior. And we're going to try to, as we go through this hour, answer these questions. What is organizational behavior? Why is it important? What are organizations like as work settings? What is the nature of management and leadership in organizations? How do we learn about organizational behavior? All right, pretty simple here, definition about organizational behavior. Nothing really that we couldn't figure out on our own without this definition. And that is, it's the study of how people behave in organizations. We spend a good percent of our waking hours at work. So we ought to find out what goes on, how it goes on. We ought to find out how to study behavior, how people work, how they interact, etc. Notice that it is considered an interdisciplinary field in that there's a number of fields that we talk about that encompass organizational behavior. Some sociology, some psychology, some political science, some economics. There's others that are listed in there. So we need to figure out how people work. Well, excuse me, not so much work. How people behave and interact with each other and in groups and in organizations. We find that we use the scientific models. Scientific models are thought by people and unfortunately thought, well, okay, we're going to use a scientific model. Science figures everything out. This is kind of magic. Well, in fact, of the matter, it's not magic. We have to go through the scientific method process, which is, if I use the term arduous, it'll seem like, well, we never get there. But the scientific method is time consuming. It is testing a hypothesis to see if it works. If the hypothesis doesn't work, we go back and retest, see what else we have to do. And this is what we talk about here between causes of events with independent variables and dependent variables. independent variables are ones that we cannot control. The dependent variables are. So we try to do that, to manipulate it to come out to something that we want to see, something we tried to envision. If you look at figure 1.1, which is the next slide that we're coming to here, it talks about the different ways that organizational behavior, different types of scientific research that organizational behavior uses to try to test theories and hypotheses, etc. Field studies, laboratory studies, case studies, survey studies, and then meta-analysis. We won't do any field studies in this course because we're working online, so we won't do something else, because you notice a field study means it takes place where we want it to take place, to use a term, where the action is. And we won't do laboratory studies because those are simulated in some way, and there's a controlled setting. We will use case studies, and we use case studies throughout this course. Normally, we have 2 case studies a week, and they're very interesting. Matter of fact, the first one we're going to work, case 1B, talks about a method of research, how somebody wants to be able to prove her particular point. Then we talk about Xerox is the next case we use. Pardon me, others. Obviously, surveys are good things to use, but there's a downside to a survey. The downside to a survey is you have to ask the people who are going to participate. We know that a lot of surveys are done, particularly in political surveys, about who's winning in a race for Congress or for president or whatever. And then we find out that today, because so many people have cell phones, some of that research is not as good as it used to be. If you just go back to the previous election, it showed that the outcome of the United States Senate was probably going to be very close. It leaned toward the Republicans, were probably going to be very close. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't close at all, and there was a huge change. The Republicans had to take 6 seats to win the majority in the Senate. Wound up taking 10, and so somebody questioned, or some bodies actually questioned, the efficacy of the surveys. So for surveys, you have to get people to participate. If you have a mail survey, there used to be good data, so if you had 14% return rate, it would be great. So try to remember taking that data, turning it into analysis, a statistical analysis, when you only have 14% of your population participating, it's a little difficult to make this. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with statistics, and people that do that do a very good job of it. But that's a problem with using questionnaires and things of that nature. And another problem with using questionnaires is that sometimes the way that they're set up, a person would answer one way based upon how the questions were framed. So which technique generalizes across multiple settings? The 3 choices here: field studies, meta-analysis, and case studies. And the answer to that question is meta-analysis, for the reasons that are shown here on the slide, which I'm really not going to get into because you can read that as well as I can. But let's talk now about the next slide that's here. And by the way, while you're on the line, while both of you are on the line, please stop me if you have questions. I'll answer them as we go along. I have a limited amount of time that I can be in the building tonight, so we'll try to, and I got started late, and I apologize for that. So we'll try to take short breaks. We have 3 chapters to cover tonight, and I'll try to cover those. If not, normally I spend about, when I'm only doing 2 chapters a night, I spend about 2 hours. This one usually takes a little bit more than that, so I'll try to finish it at least by 7 o'clock when I have to be out of here. Scientific thinking is important. I mentioned that a little bit before. Scientific thinking is always important because you're trying to process data and collection and do it in a systematic method, a systematic way to be able to get the information that you're going to look for. There's another thing about scientific method and scientific thinking. One of the things you want to be able to do, and this not too interesting that you're going to have to do, but you have to understand how this research is conducted, and that is to be able to replicate the hypothesis that is reached, pardon me, and a conclusion that is reached. And that is part of the problem we have with many things that we talk about in science. Things are not replicated, or somebody will say, "Wait a minute, yeah, you did this, but that thinking is fuzzy, and you didn't control for this and didn't control for that," and so we have to pay attention to that. Notice the last thing: only explanations that can be rigorously verified are accepted. What that verified means is that someone else took your data and did another survey, if you will, or case study or laboratory study or something, and was able to verify the data that you came up with. Contingency thinking is exactly what it says. It tells us that we're thinking a little bit differently. We have a situation here that perhaps we've always answered it a certain way, but we need to think about it differently and see if we can come up with a different approach. Responses to solutions are not always simple, and they have to be crafted to the evidence that we have at hand. Evidence-based management, pretty easy to explain here. We are using facts to make decisions. We're not using something pie in the sky. We're not grabbing at straws. We're not using intuition. Now, I'm not saying intuition's not good. There are times it has to be used. But evidence-based thinking is we're going to go through this, we're going to pay attention to this, and we're going to be able to come up with a solution that we can verify and have good data upon which to base our conclusions. Now, I'm not going to read this laundry list to you because you can read it just as well as I can. Modern workplace trends, and I'm just going to pick out a couple of them. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about as we go through this course, and that's a commitment to ethical behavior. And as you know, we're going to work on ethics and OB scenario each week. They're listed in your textbook. The first one's found on page 16, and you read the scenario, and then you respond to the questions in the shaded area below. Post those in the forum section, and then respond to another student's post. And that way we can get some interaction. People think of things differently, and so many times there's not right and wrong answers to what we're posing here, but we want to try to get a full flavor of things. We find in many cases a demise or a lessening, probably is a better way to say it, of command and control. That's done because of this medium that I'm using here tonight that you're participating in. Because people can, in the workplace, interact immediately with subordinates or superiors via email or text or some other type social media. The number of middle managers that we have in the workplace has been reduced. One of the things that managers did years ago was pass along information. Well, when you have a piece of equipment like I have here, like you have at your home, that you carry with you or whatever, we don't need that relay of information because it's given to you pretty quickly. And then, of course, that comes to the next thing, and that is the influence of technology. I can't begin to tell you how much technology, this type of technology, and its descendants has changed the way we work in the workplace today. So it's a lot different. Is it better? In many cases, it is. Is it worse? In some cases it is, and I only want to put this out to you because we tend to get what I call, maybe what you call, information overload. And we're bombarded by information on a around the clock basis. And so we have to be able to make sense of what we get, to keep what's necessary and discard what is not necessary. Well, this is definition of an organization, and I don't think there's anything here that's magic. It's just the people who come together to achieve a purpose or purposes. And you could say it's a goal, you could say it's an objective, whatever word you want to use. They come to what's the best word I want to use here? They come to make sure that the company is doing, I'm using that as in place of organization, is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I'm going to use a statement here that I will probably use throughout the course, and that is every person who works for an organization, no matter his or her status within the organization, must know the organization's mission, goals, and objectives, and how his or her job fits in with that and promotes the organization's achievement of the mission, goals, and objectives. Organizational culture, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this slide because we talk about organizational culture in greater depth later in the course, chapter 15, if my memory serves me correctly. But organizational culture is what we within the organization believe. And people who don't believe that, who don't accept that, will have problems working within the organization. And they may cause problems, as we'll see when we talk about these later on in the course. So one of the things that organizations do when they're hiring people, and we won't talk much about hiring in the course, but one of the things they do when they are hiring, especially people in the upper echelons of the company, they look for a cultural fit. Does this person fit the culture of the organization? And many companies try to hire on that basis. Organizational climate, again, something we're going to talk about much greater later in the course. Notice it talks about shared perceptions. Organizations try to mold their employees in certain ways and in certain manners by various and sundry means. Sometimes they tell stories, sometimes they have a saga, sometimes they have rituals, etc. And that's what they're trying to do with this. And notice that talks about here both formal and informal management policies. Now, open systems is pretty easy to understand, but what it means here simply is this. An organization takes resources from the outside, known as inputs, and then through its resources, both equipment, financial, and human being the most important part, transform those inputs into outputs, either goods or services, or in some cases, both. And we can see this model, figure 1.2, talking about the inputs that we have, and then the transformation process, and then the outputs that we have, figure 1.2, which you can see on page 10 in your textbook. Organizations also talk about value chains. Now, you'll get value chain in other courses and spend more time on them than we're going to spend value chain here. But what this is, as the slide says, a sequence of activities that result in the creation of what we're trying to create, goods or services, and giving value to the customer. That's one of the things that companies want to do today, is not just meet the customer's needs, but to exceed what he's looking for or she's looking for. It's the big issue for any organization, and that's stakeholders. Too often, we lump stakeholders and stockholders together, and they're two different animals. A stockholder may be a stakeholder, but not all stakeholders are stockholders. And here we're talking about every individual or group of individuals that has some interaction with your organization. Obviously, it's employees, it's suppliers, it's customers, it's the government because of regulations. And then how are we good stewards of the environment? It's the community in which we have our operations. All those things have some impact upon an organization. There are two climates, if you will. There's an internal climate, which the organization can control, its resources and things that it does. And then most of the stakeholders in an organization are outside. That's the external climate, and that's a climate that the organization cannot control. This is just posing a question to you, and the question describe an organization that you work for, or perhaps a fraternal organization in which you are a member. Was the culture constructive? Was it defensive? Was it aggressive? I'm not asking you to answer those things, but you may want to share that in a forum post as we go along. What we do here is we learn from your experiences. Hopefully you'll learn from my experiences, and we'll learn from sharing those experiences with each other and responding to them. Workforce diversity. We are going to spend more time on workforce diversity in the next chapter, toward the end of the chapter, actually. And this is just having a myriad, my term here, of different genders. Well, we can only have two genders, and myriad of that, of people from different backgrounds, etc. So that's what diversity means. Now, we have two other terms that probably take greater resonance and perhaps have a greater meaning for us. And they're either multiculturalism or inclusion. I prefer one over the other, and I hope to be able to explain to you why. Multiculturalism just talks about the plurality that we find and that the organization respects diversity. Inclusion, on the other hand, takes everything we've just talked about, diversity and multiculturalism, and goes a step further. And you'll get this in the Xerox case. And what it says is, not only do we value that difference, we ensure that everyone, regardless of the difference or differences, has an equal opportunity to promotion opportunities, to use of resources, et cetera, et cetera. So inclusion is embedding everybody in the same opportunities. That's the best way I think I can say that. And you will notice when you get to the Xerox case, and I'm not getting into the questions that are posed to you, but in the Xerox case, how Xerox moved from diversity to inclusion. It's very, very, I think, a very graphic way of talking about it. Now, this again is just one of these questions that you can see posed to you. Professor says to you, or instructor says to you, one of your assignments as a team project. Please select and sign up for a team. So you work with your friends, you wait for everybody else to sign up and to decide what to do, or you just pick a team randomly. What we tend to do is, hello? Okay. We tend to gravitate to our friends this has been my experience, both as a person who has been on a team when I was in graduate school more than undergraduate school, or a person who was assigning a team project. What I saw people do is we either tend to gravitate toward our friends, or we tend to just wait until the end and then join the team because we have to join the team. Here is a difference in how we look at management today. A manager really is supposed to help support the work of other people. But taking that a step further, to be effective, that person helps others achieve high performance. Now, if you want to see the difference between the two, the one would be just providing resources and being there to answer questions, etc., where the other one takes an active role in what the employee is doing and tries to help him or her achieve to a high standard. We have two things we are concerned about, and this again is a concept, or these two concepts here, task performance and job satisfaction. We're going to talk about them a little bit more, a little bit later. I don't remember exactly which chapter we're going to talk about them. One school says that performance is a precursor to satisfaction. The other one says satisfaction is a precursor to performance. But performance is what we do. And it's not how we do it, it's what we do. We're hired to do something, and that's what our task performance is. Hopefully, it's good. If we have high job satisfaction, the adage is we'll have high job performance. How well those two correlate, I don't know. But we can think of people that we worked with who were unhappy with their job. And their task performance probably showed that. And yet we've seen other people who liked doing what they did, and their task performance usually was high. If that's not been your experience, please let me know. Now, these are the 4 functions of management. You can see these graphically displayed on in figure 1.3 on page 12. The 4 are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Often we think of controlling as controlling employees, and in some cases that's true. But controlling, as we want to talk about it here, is controlling processes and making sure that the processes we're using to produce goods or services are within tolerance. And when they're not within tolerance, then we take corrective action to change that. And this is the slide that I was, the figure I was speaking about in the text. Notice you have 2 people, or managers and team leaders. They are a little bit different, although sometimes a team leader can take over some of the functions of management. Usually a manager is not a team leader because of the differences. These are the roles that managers play. Now, they're different from functions. These are information, interpersonal, and decision. And these are all important. And as you can see this graphically displayed, figure 1.4 on page 13. He's come from Henry Mintzberg. He's a noted management guru. He's as a Canadian. I think he still teaches in Canada, in Toronto, but I can't tell you the university. And these are just things that are supposed to be done. Now, we're going to take this a step further. These are roles. Remember, we had functions. Now we have roles, and then we're going to get to an area called managerial skills. And this is something that we all have. And a skill, pardon me, is where we have learned something, and then we're able to take that learning and turn it into a productive skill. Technical skills, human skills, and conceptual skills. And managers have to have this. And actually, if you want to look at this, this is done as a hierarchy in a way. I don't have a slide here to show you this, but those folks who are supervisors or first line managers have to have an abundance of technical skills. They have to have human skills, human relations skills, if you will, and then they have to have conceptual skills. But they are in ascending or descending order, however you want to look at that. Technical first, conceptual second, and then, technical first, human second, then conceptual. We move to middle managers. Still have to have some technical skill, although not as much as the people below us. A great deal of human skills and more conceptual skills. And then the folks in the corner offices really have to have the conceptual skills. Obviously, they have to have some human relations, and they're not really required to have as many technical skills, although it's best for them to be able to understand them and at least be conversant with them. Emotional intelligence, again, something we're going to speak about a little bit later in greater depth in the course. Emotional intelligence really is encapsulated or incorporated with what you see here. Aware of self, being able to regulate, being motivated. And it says here motivation, but I'm saying being motivated. You're motivated. You have empathy. That's just being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand his or her situation. Much different than sympathy. We often lump those two together. They're not the same at all. And then good social skills. Obviously, something that's really needed. We're coming close to the end of this chapter and what we want to speak about. And this is a figure that you can see on page 17 in the text. And this is ethics. And we go from ethical person here in the middle, moral leadership, virtuous, and then amoral, which means don't have any. If you're a little confused about that, A in front of a word comes from the Latin, and it means without. So it's without morals. And we can talk about what the amoral manager does, and then the immoral manager, and then the moral manager. You can see these on pages 16 and 17 in the text. That's a big problem. It's a big issue in organizations. We want people to behave ethically. And when we find that those in front of us or those superior to us don't, it causes a ripple effect throughout out the organization. We place a greater emphasis today on morals and ethics and ethical behavior in organizations. Probably done a little bit more of that since the Enron debacle in 2001, the problems with WorldCom and Adelphia and a few other organizations. Fact of the matter is, we've been talking about cleaning up ethics in corporations for 25 or more years that I can think of. I wrote a paper about that when I was in graduate school, and that was 25 years ago. That particular paper. So it's not something we've not talked about before. All organizations should promote learning. You should be learning. I should be learning every day. Something different, something new. That's what keeps us invigorated and keeps our minds sharp. This is the next thing we get to, lifelong learning. Just as an extension of what I just said. And then finally, this is somewhat akin to what is known as the Kolb theory. David Kolb was an adult learning person, and he talked about, here we have initial experience, as you can see it here, and then it goes to reflection, to theory building, and to experimentation. Kolb looked at it a little bit differently, and he saw it as a circle as opposed to a square or a rectangle that we have here. He talked about concrete experience and using observations and reflections, formation of abstract concepts and generalizations, and then finally moving to testing implications and concepts in new situations. So what initial experience or concrete experience here means as far as Kolb is concerned, it's full involvement in what we're experiencing right now. The observation or reflection over here, reflection on and observation of the learner's experiences from many perspectives. That would be you, the student, as the same here. I'm sorry? Theory building would come from formation of abstract concepts and generalizations. Kolb says that it's creation of concepts that integrate the student's observations into logically sound theories. And that comes back to testing implementations or experimentation, using these theories to make decisions and solve problems. That brings me to the end of chapter 1. Do you have any questions I can answer for you?
No, at this stage.
All right. Thank you. I want to take a couple-minute break. It's 5:24. Let's come back at 5:27.
No, at this stage.
And we will get into chapter 2.
I have a question. Where do we post that summary of chapter 1 at?
I'm sorry, please. Can you say that again?
Where do we post this? I have a question. Where do we post that summary of chapter 1
Upload that
at?
into the coursework assignments page.
Where do we post the summary of chapter 1 at?
I didn't understand what you said. Could you repeat that, please?
You said on the assignments.
Where do you post it at?
I just told you in the coursework assignments page in Campus Web.
For the chapter 1 summary, where do you post it at?
You click on that, and it'll show you that you're to upload those. The case studies,
Okay.
ethics and OB scenarios, and article analyses are to be posted in the forum discussion section, which is separate. Forum discussions, everyone can see what you've written, and everyone will be able to see my responses to what's written. The purpose of the forum sections is to do exactly what we would do in a classroom. We would work a case study in a classroom. Some people would present it, other people would answer it, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe we'd have teams doing that. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here with the forum sections. The summaries, we don't share the summaries. I've thought about that 2 or 3 different times. I feel that's the best approach, but we get maximum use from the case studies, ethics and OB scenarios, and the article analyses by posting them in the forum section.
Okay.
If you have issues with that, you're not sure, let me know again, and then I can I'll try to take you where you need to be.
All right.
All right.
All right, we're at 5:27. I just got the rest of the slides downloaded so we can get into this and understand what we want to talk about here. As we go through this chapter, we hope to answer the following questions. What are individual differences and why are they important? What is personality? How are personality and stress related? what are individual values, and finally, why is diversity important in the workplace? Well, I think we know what individual differences are, and I really don't think that we need any particular explanation of them, but to understand differences and to understand them well, we need to understand ourselves. We need to understand our likes and our dislikes. We find that likes and dislikes channel us to make certain value judgments. And we may not want to make them. We may not particularly want to hold to them, but we find that that's what happens. So two things that we need to be able to do down here about individual differences. We need to have self-awareness, which we'll talk about continually throughout this course. And notice what it talks about down there. It talks about preferences, talks about styles, talks about biases. And we all have biases. Some biases are good, and most biases, however, are not. If we talk about bias of being biased to act in a certain way that is ethically sound, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we talk about a bias about something or somebody or some bodies, because it's an impression we formed or was formed for us, and we hold on to those and have no idea why, but continue to act in that fashion, that's harmful. Harmful to us, harmful to the people that we unfairly judge. And then we have to be aware of others, and the same thing with others, what they prefer, what their biases are, what their styles are, what their personalities are. That's not saying that you have to like that. It's not saying that you have to try to change that, although some people will try to do it. It is that you have to understand that, and you either have to learn how to work through that or to work with that person, understanding the things that he or she comes with. We all come with a certain amount of baggage. Hopefully, the less, the better. But we have to understand that, and we have to be able to work through those things. Now, this talks about components of self. Notice it's made up of three things. There's self-concept, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. Now, I am not going to speak about self-efficacy now. Self-efficacy is prominently addressed in chapter 14, and I believe we'll see self-efficacy a couple of times before we get there. So I'm not going to talk about self-efficacy now. I want to wait till we get to chapter 14 because I think it hangs together better when we're in that particular chapter. But self-concept is, how do we evaluate ourselves? I think that's the best way to look at this. And we talk about, obviously physical makeup, social makeup, our spirituality, in some cases, our knowledge, our experiences, etc. And then self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves. Do we feel good about ourselves? Do we feel that, what's the best thing to say? I guess it's our self-worth, as the slide says. And that has a lot to do with how we perceive things, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter, but also has a lot to do with how we interact with people and how we do things on the job. If we have good self-esteem, we're going to probably do well. If we don't have real good self-esteem, we're probably looking for scapegoat someplace. And now, in fact, you can take that as my interpretation here. It doesn't mean it's exactly correct, but I think that it tends to be. Because we're always looking for some reason that we were not able to do what we wanted to do. Somebody else caused that. I didn't have the right resources. Whatever it is. And that usually comes from not having good esteem about him or herself. Now, this is an age-old term, got an age-old concept. I think it's probably better than that. And how do we get to where we are today? Is it nature, which means that those things have been some of those things have all been predetermined for us. How we look, color of our hair, color of our eyes, stature, tall, thin, short, maybe you need to take off a few pounds, stocky, and of course, male or female, uh, and national origin, et cetera, et cetera. The other is nurture. Actually, right, nurture, and that is our environmental surroundings. And when we are strictly within the family clan, we're probably not going to be influenced too much by this nurture business. If we're completely within that clan cocoon, and we're not being exposed to other things. But most of us are not completely in that type of cocoon. We go to school, we work, we play, we do other type things. And so there's a nurture type thing here. And this comes from culture. Of course, that culture can be, in some cases, nature. Social situations, like we just talked about, school, etc., and other type of factors. All of those help make us up. So it isn't one or the other. We could possibly get more of one than we do from the other, depending upon a whole raft of things within our own little system, if you will. This particular slide shows the heredity on the left, environment on the right, and then showing here personality change. Which brings us to the next topic. I'll move these slides up here just a little bit. And that, pardon me, and that is personality. Personality is simply what makes us us, and makes us us and no one else. Notice the term that the slide says, unique. There is no other person like us. Now, yes, you can make a case about identical twins, but there's still differences in identical twins. They're probably the closest to saying, yeah, there's another copy of me out someplace. But most of us aren't like that. And most twins are not identical. So it's what makes us us. And it makes us much different than anybody else. And it causes us to act and react in certain ways. Personality is made up of 5, this slide says dimensions. I would use the term traits. As a matter of fact, if you look at this on page 29 in the text, it does use the term traits. It uses, but here we say dimensions, and it doesn't make much difference. And the 5 are extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness to experience. Extroversion is exactly what it says. We tend to be outgoing. Now, the converse of that is introversion. Person who is inward thinking and doesn't do much in acting with society as a whole. Agreeableness. Can we get along? They use the term here on the slide as good-natured. Yeah, I can see that, but I like to use the term, are we able to get along? Everybody isn't necessarily as good-natured as the next person, but he or she still has the ability to get along. And it's a little bit of difference there, and I like to talk about that. Also, notice the other things here, trusting and cooperative. Conscientiousness means that we're responsible individuals, and we take responsibility for our actions. And then just a second here. I want to move down just a second. The other two are, as we mentioned, emotional stability. Obviously, that just means, are we secure in our own skin? Are we able to deal with whatever demons we have, or do we let the demons control us? That's the difference there. And then openness to experience. There's a lot of things thinking about openness to experience. And I like to use the term about people who are using technology today, the type of technology that we have here. And we talk about people being early adapters, getting on board right away. And we talk about people being late adapters, which is probably me. And then we talk about people who don't want to be adapting at all. So that's what that means. And then just open. Are you open to experience? Are you say, okay, I'm willing to try this? And it was very difficult for me to learn to do what I'm doing now. And even tonight, Mr. Anderson was here, and I had some problems. I got myself messed up, but I was able to get through it and figure out. I don't know if I figured out what I did wrong, but I was able to get back to what I needed to get back to. 3 or 4 years ago, what frustrated me, I said, I can't do this. We'll be back another day. Well, I came close to doing that tonight, but I was able to get through it. So, am I open to doing it? So I'm able to grapple with what I have, and that's simply what that means. Social traits. We have to be able to do this. How do we view others in the various social settings, and how do we interact with people? It's very important to think about that. So we have to have social skills. We have to have social skills at the workplace. That's very, very important. We have to be able to get along with people. Information gathering is just exactly what it says. And part of what we're going to talk about here gets us into what is known as the Myers-Briggs test, which some of you may be familiar with. Some people gather information from the outside environment, and others gather information from within. Now that doesn't mean the person who gathers information from within doesn't use this information out here in the environment. He or she does use that information, and that person brings it in, internalizes it, and then does something with it. Whereas the person who gets it completely from the outside kind of lets that dictate what he or she knows. This is the little bit of a talk about here about the Myers-Briggs system, which is based on the work of Carl Jung, as I remember. I may be wrong about Jung, but it's people who fall into different categories: sensation feeling, sensation thinking, intuitive feeling, intuitive thinking. There's more categories. There are a lot of people that I know that take the Myers-Briggs test, and Myers-Briggs comes out and confirms what they had already thought, and they say, okay, that's what I am. Well, I think that that's probably foolish to do that unless you find it in one of these Myers-Briggs answers. You're really far out here, really strong in this particular area. And if you're kind of in toward the middle, it probably means that's how you feel today, or that's how you viewed a particular situation, or that's how you viewed the question and how you answered it. I'm not telling you that the Myers-Briggs test is not important. I'm not telling you the Myers-Briggs test doesn't provide valuable information. What I'm saying to you is use it not with caution, but use it for what it is, and don't say, okay, well, that's because it said that. That's just the way I am. And it is good, but just be careful. And the second thing is, maybe a more important thing, is if you do take a Myers-Briggs test, make sure the person who gives it to you is certified. I think that's the proper term to use Myers-Briggs, or to give Myers-Briggs, and that that person is also certified, qualified, or the right term is, to interpret the results. How do we evaluate and problem solving? We're going to talk a lot about decision making in chapter 9, but how we deal with the information we have is really critical, and it tells us a lot about ourselves. So this is thinking about here, feeling, the emphasis on thinking. Again, this is part of what the Myers-Briggs does. And if you can see the bottom, feeling type individuals, I'm going to read this. Feeling type individuals are oriented towards conformity and try to accommodate themselves to other people. Thinking individuals use reason and intellect to deal with problems and downplay emotions. Now, I never know how good that is. I know which side I fall on, but I don't try to make a whole lot of sense about it. Personal conception traits. This is kind of going back to what we talked about before, how we think about our social and physical settings. And there's multiple things that go into this. So we may feel one way in a certain type of setting, and we go to a different type of setting, and our thought process is 100%. 100%. It's 180 degrees difference is the best way to say that. That make one wrong and the other right? No. It just means, given this situation, this is what we feel. This is how we're going to act. Locus of control simply means whether or not you feel like you're in control of what's happening to you. Or does the outside environment, do events over which I have no control, make me do certain things? I think most of us want to say we're in control of ourselves, but we do know that there are times when there are events that happen that outside of our control cause us to behave differently. I guess the one I can use the best, not been a recent experience, but it has been experienced to me, is the death of a parent. I think that causes us to act a lot different. We have no control over that. And I'm not talking about somebody who was an accident or something of that nature. I'm talking about just natural death. We have no control over that. But I think we act differently, even though, for the most part, we're in control of our own emotions. So we're in control of what we do. You know, there are times that we're not in control. We have to realize that. Do we have a proactive personality? Notice what it says here, that we're not followers. We get the change that we want. We take charge. And we continue with that taking charge until we get the results we're looking for. Now, it says here until meaningful change occurs. And I submit to you that that's correct. But we may not want to accept that meaningful change. And so we will continue to do what we can do to have the results be what we want them to be. Here's some more parts of personality, and we probably know people that fall into this area. Authoritarianism and dogmatism. These two concepts, at least as far as I'm concerned, tend to follow each other. Authoritarianism, people tend to obey what's given to them, and they tend to be rigid. There's no bending. There's no shades of gray. It's either black or white. Dogmatism, notice it leads a person to think of what's going on in the world, of the world itself as threatening, and that person believes that the only thing that will save him or her from that is reliance on authority, and authority being power. Now, this next concept we come to is Machiavellianism. This is named after Niccolo Machiavelli, who was a bureaucrat, for lack of a better term, in Venice many years ago, many centuries ago, I guess is the best way to say that. He has written a book called The Prince. I recommend that you read it. The last I looked, you could buy a paperback copy for around $5. Is it required for this course? Absolutely not. But it will give you some idea into Machiavellianism. Notice the first thing that Machiavelli does, or his personality does, is approach things in a logical manner. But notice the second thing. They're capable of stretching the truth to get what they want. Now, I submit to you that that's not logical. Using falsehoods is not logical. It doesn't follow. They have no friendships. There's no loyalty to anybody. And so this is a person that you can count on to change as he or she needs to change depending upon the situation. And finally, they're so good at what they do, they influence other people. Now, I'm not telling you there's anything about Machiavelli that's necessarily good. Some of it is not bad. Certainly using logic is a good approach. But the rest of it is really kind of frightening in a way. So if you have a chance, get the Prince. As I said, it's not a large outlay. It'll give you some kind of an idea about what he is and how he acted, etc. People with low Machiavellianism or Machiavellian personality, notice they accept what other people tell them to do in unstructured situations. And at the reverse, they'll work very hard in structured situations to achieve end results. Now, here's a little thing for you if you're interested. What are your Machiavellian tendencies? You can take this match test to find out. I think it's matchtest.com, but don't hold me to that. And it'll let you know where you stand on Machiavelli. Self-monitoring. Ability to adjust. It's also ability of not going with the flow. Adjusting to externals, to the situation, environmental factors. This is something that's really kind of critical for all of us. And we have to be careful about our emotions. We're going to talk more about emotions and moods shortly. We have to make sure that we can control them to some extent. And we also have the two kinds of people here, type A and type B. And type A is go, 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 go. And type B is a person who is laid back. The next topic we come to is a big issue for organizations and for individuals and organizations. And that, excuse me, I didn't move my slide up. And that is stress. There are a lot of sources of stress, family conditions, work conditions, work relationships, family relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And some stress is not bad. Other stress is really destructive. And we have to be careful to be able to separate the two and to get the type of even keel operation that we want to try to get. These are work-related stressors. So I'm not going to talk a great deal about this, but there are a couple of them that I think that we need to look at. I'm not going to examine them a whole lot, but one is a role conflict. You're supposed to be doing something and you're told to do something else. Or it could be you find yourself assigned to a team, but you still have to report to your old boss. That's a conflict. And then the next one that comes beneath that is an ethical dilemma. We talked a little bit about ethics before. We're going to talk a lot more about ethics a little bit later. This is something we have to be concerned about. We're going to talk about ethics throughout the course and the ethics of the OB scenarios. And a dilemma is when you have two unsatisfactory choices to make, or you have, you just can't really do what you want to do. You need to act one way, and yet people are pushing you to work other ways. Now, there are more in here, and there's a lot of them that are important. I don't mean to dismiss them, but those two always stick out to me, and that's why I like to talk about them to a little bit of an extent. These are life stressors, and there are many. And one of the life stressors that we don't think about is the birth of a child. We always think of, boy, that's a happy event, but yet it changes your life, especially if it's the first child. Things aren't the way they used to be, and so there's some stress there. Obviously, money problems can cause stresses, and then just personal interactions. So we have to be careful about those things. We have to make sure we address them in the proper way, and not let that stress get the best of us. These are some outcomes of stress. Notice the first type of stress talked about here is constructive stress, also called eustress. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a background here. EU from the Greek means true. I don't know if it's meant to be that way here, true stress, but notice what they talk about here. They use the term moderate. And we can think of this as maybe you have to work overtime. You knew you were going to have to work overtime. It comes, and obviously there's some stress in getting the job done and things of that nature. But you know that is going to come to an end, and you also know that you have some control over that. So that's not bad stress to be in, because you have some control over that. The destructive stress. The destructive stress or distress, you really don't have any control over. And of course, people can put stress on themselves, and then they go on rampages. We know about that. We know about the people who've gone back to their employers and shot people, and we had the term that came into the language. Where the post office had something about people going postal. So we know that, but a lot of that stress, it comes on somebody, and there are environmental factors that cause that stress, and they don't seem to have a way to be able to handle that stress. And so they get outside of themselves, and they do things that ordinarily they would never even think about doing. The one thing I want to mention to you here, and I think we have another occasion or two throughout the course is, if you're working in a company and you notice a coworker having stress issues, get him or her to the proper people to take care of it. Don't try to do it yourself. Usually people don't want to go, they don't want to admit failings, etc. But get them there. That's the best thing. That's the same thing true with alcohol and drug addiction and other type things like that. People have different type of coping mechanisms. We really have to be careful about that. And notice what it talks about here is we have to address what it is that's causing the stress and do whatever we can to eliminate it. Now, there's also the opportunity, if you can, to avoid the situations that cause the stress. We're not always able to do that, but if you can do that, that's a good thing to do. Very, very important. Many organizations have wellness opportunities and then there are employee assistance programs. That's what I was saying before. You notice somebody's having some problems with whatever happens to be, get to talk to your supervisor, whoever you have to talk to, but help get that person to the place where he or she needs help. There are mental health agencies in most large cities, United States, and some counties, etc. If you don't have that opportunity at work, try to get the person to that area. Each of us have values, and we find those coming from many things, many cases, many areas. We are going to talk more later about values, what we prefer, and this is like a traffic cop directing us to do certain type things. And notice what it says here. Values influence our behavior. Two types of values, terminal values and instrumental values. Terminal values are outcomes, things that we want to be able to do, whereas instrumental values can be thought of as a roadmap. The roadmap tells us how to get from point A to point B or some other point beyond that. And so I think that's kind of a good way to look at these. Terminal talks about outcomes, what we want to achieve here, and then instrumental is the roadmap that we use to get to where we want to be. Miglino's categories of workplace values. Notice here: achievement, helping and concern for others, honesty, and fairness. I would say that those are good values. Value congruence, best way to explain this is we like to be with those like us. And that's what value congruence talks about. Notice here about what it's talking about. Positive feelings when encountering others who share the same values. Now, this is your experience again. Not required to answer this, but think of a job you had in which you excelled and were most productive. Which of your individual values contributed to that? You need to think about that and see where you fall in that particular area. Culture. When it comes to organizations and also to individuals, it is what we do has been shaped by others. Organizations, they have to have a culture. You go to work for your organization, eventually you're imbued within that culture. You belong to an ethnic group. We all do. And that ethnic group has shaped your culture. This is talking about diversity in the workplace. And notice the things we have here. Power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, excuse me, long-term, short-term orientation. And we can break these down into power distance, how we use power. Do we accept the status? And there are differences in that we are able to get along with that. Uncertainty avoidance. Do we want to be in a structured organization? Do we want to be in a structured environment? The whole story about people who excel in the military or in police forces or fire departments or in union organizations. There's some structure there. Do they want that? Or do we want to avoid structure? Individualism versus collectivism. Do we like to work in a team, or we want to work as individuals? Americans have a difficult time working in teams because this is an individualistic society. It's what it was built on. And I like to say that, there's no particular ethnic group in the United States. Now, don't think about race here. I'm talking about ethnic group, where all kinds of different ethnic groups in the United States. But the one thing that holds us together is this individualism. We find it here, we find it in Australia, we find it in a lot of other places. Or do we want to be collective and work in a team? Masculinity, femininity, do we hang on to stereotypes? And then finally, long-term, short-term orientation. Americans are short-term oriented. We want the silver bullet answer for everything that we encounter, and then we're going to move on to the next problem. Whereas the Japanese have a long-term orientation. Now you can look at the bottom of page 41, figure 2.4, which gives a representative sample of collectivism and individualism, low power distance and high power distance. You can see where the United States is. Figure 2.4 at the bottom of page 41. Workforce diversity. We talked about this earlier. This is just having a number of people from differences within the workplace. And notice what it says here. People are considered to be different in some way. And we are all different in some way. And we have to think about it in that fashion. We can't say those guys over there or those girls over there. We're all different. We have to think about that. These are the benefits of diversity, and we get strength by having diverse opinions and diverse approaches to decision making. And we're going to talk about the difference in diversity in groups when we get to those chapters 7 and 8. And this is different. What makes us different? And we're talking about diversity. Here's the different situations we don't always think about all these. We don't always think about education. We don't always think about parental status, for instance, or experience, or some other type things. We have to be careful with this. It's when we make generalizations about people and put them into a certain category based upon things that we know from in the back of our mind. Oversimplification, often wrong. And notice what's here. It's potentially offensive. So we have to be careful about that. We know that we have made some strides in this country about bringing equality in based upon what a person can do as opposed to where that person comes from. But we also know that if you have certain educational backgrounds with certain standing, social standing, etc., your chances to succeed are greater than someone else's. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. Gender is another thing we have to look at. Women bring different skill sets to the workplace, and we're going to find that spoken to a great deal in the Xerox case. And then we have the leaking pipeline phenomenon, which I'm not going to go into because that's part of the Xerox case. And I want you to come to your own conclusion about what that means, as opposed to me making some mention about it. Sexual orientation is another thing we talk about. We talk more about that today than we did many years ago. So we have to think about this. We have to pay attention to it. There are executive orders that have gone into place that have changed things. There have been court rulings that now allow same-sex marriage. And what we find is that while many people, quote unquote people, I'm not singling anyone out, still actively opposed to this, the vast majority of Americans do not. It seems as though we've been able to move beyond old stigmas and say, well, that's acceptable, and let's get on with it. We have other fish to fry. Age, of course, can be that issue. We still have a number of baby boomers in the workplace. And we have to be careful about generalizing that these people can't do certain things. Same way we generalize that younger people can't do certain things. We just need to back off that and not to generalize. That's stereotyping. Old people can't adapt. That's not true. When you think about Colonel Sanders, the guy that started Kentucky Fried Chicken, now known as KFC, 65 years old when he started that business. Of course, he had a business before that, so he had some kind of idea. But road construction took his business away from him. And instead of saying, okay, well, I'll just take my savings and collect my Social Security and go home, he didn't do that. Started a new business. He's not the only one. He's just happy to be one of my favorites. Disability, that is something that is in the workplace. We have to remember that there is an act of Congress, Americans with Disability Act, I believe 1990, it might be off a year or two, says that a person's qualified and a company can make reasonable accommodations. There's no reason to exclude them. Now notice the word reasonable, and it only applies to companies with a certain number of employees. But years ago, those people wouldn't get a chance. Social identity theory, I can't talk to you too much about this. I know a little bit about it. Try to understand the psychological basis of discrimination. I don't know that there is one. I'll use the case of the President of the United States. There are people that don't like him, not because of what he does, not because of what he stands for, simply because of who he is. And I'm only using the president in that fashion. And I don't mean that to be demeaning to him or anybody else. But that's a little. If you want to criticize him for what he's done, fine. Don't criticize him for who he is. And this is more about diversity in the workplace. Organizations that do this. These are the ways they achieve it. I talked a little bit before about inclusion. Inclusion is mentioned here on page 47 in the text, and a very good comment in the margin, and basis what's on the inside. By the way, I want to mention something to you. Be careful about reading margin definitions. Later in the course, when we're talking about out groups, I believe, or in groups, there is a margin comment. I'll get to that, and I'll mention it when we get to it. So chapter 12 or 13, maybe chapter 14. What is in the margin is incorrect. And I don't know how that happened. I checked with some earlier editions of this text and found out that it is incorrect. And so just be careful about making sure that the margin definitions, which are normally good, are actually the same as what's in the writing. We have reached 6:13. I will take about a 3-minute break, and we'll come back and talk about emotions, attitudes, and job satisfaction, and try to end before 7 o'clock. Do you have any questions?
Not so far, thanks.
All right. Thank you. We'll come back about 6:16.
Not so far, thanks.
Okay. Chapter 3, emotions, attitudes, and job satisfaction. I like to read the other little thing here. Feelings deserve our attention. And as we go through this chapter, we hope to answer the following questions. What are our emotions and moods? How do emotions and moods influence behavior? What are attributes and how do they influence behavior? And then finally, what is job satisfaction and why is it important? Now, we talked about that a little earlier, so this will sort of tie the loose ends together, if you will. In fact, what talks about here is a range of emotions that we experience throughout the day. And emotions are strong feelings, one way or another, about someone or something. Emotional intelligence is a unique ability to not only understand, but to understand those of others as well. So what we're trying to do is to understand ourselves and then be able to understand other folks so that we can then understand the relationship that we're into with these people or relationships and be able to manage them effectively so they don't become negative, so they don't pull at us, so they don't cause things that to go wrong that we don't want to go wrong. Now, this particular slide, figure 3.1 in the text, which you can find on page 55, are the 4 dimensions of emotionally intelligent leadership. And here we have, if you will, social awareness, relationship management, self-management, and self-awareness. And if we think about that, that is exactly what we talked about in the last slide, although somewhat differently. Self-awareness, remember, we have to be aware of ourselves, but that also told us that we have to be aware of others. And notice the term that's used here, empathy, being able to put ourselves in the other person's situation. Not sympathy, empathy. Relationship management, we just talked about. They use the first word here, rapport. It simply means getting along. Self-management, look at what it says there. Engage your brain before you fire at somebody, before we go off on a tangent or just simply go off. Think about it first. What are going to be the consequences if I just open my mouth and blast somebody? And then, I said before self-awareness, I meant to say social awareness and not self-awareness. And then self-awareness, again, comes back to understanding ourselves, our attitudes, etc. Now, 2 types of emotions, self-conscious emotions and social emotions. Now, let's deal with social emotions first. Those are emotions that come from without us. Notice, from an external source. Something else or someone else caused us to have this type of emotion or to react emotionally. Maybe that's a better way to put that. And look at what they're talking about. Pity, envy, jealousy, things of that nature. And we need to stop and think about at least the jealousy and envy. What really caused that? Is it really worth that? Are we really envious of someone? I mean, you might say, gee, I'd like to have his or her education, or gee, I'd like to have his or her wealth, but are we really envious of that? And the reason I say that is, especially on the wealth part, most of us have not been in that situation. And we really wouldn't know how to act if we had that kind of money. I'm talking about megabucks. Social conscious emotions come from us, from within. And look at the ones that they mention there: shame and guilt, embarrassment. Pride, I don't know that pride's such a bad emotion. You can be prideful of things you do, and I think that's okay as long as you don't put that on somebody else and say, look at me, how much better I am than you. But when they're within us, we can help regulate what we're doing. Now, moods are a little bit different than emotions. Now, I want to read this. I don't usually do this, but I think it's good to get this in our mind. Is generalized positive or negative feelings or states of mind. A little bit different than emotions. So here we are, and this shows us a good difference here between emotions and a mood. Emotion here on the left said somebody was aggravated with the professor because of what he or she did. So notice that that person identified where the emotion originated, and that the emotion tended to be very brief. In other words, was not long lasting, but that it can, if it continues to go on, be linked to a mood. On the other hand, a mood here says, I don't have the energy to do anything today. And I really had that type of feeling all week. So nobody knows where that came from, where that feeling of inertia came from. Notice it can also influence emotions. Now, these are major emotions here, and notice that some of them are on the positive side, some of them are on the negative side. And we feel euphoria and joy and probably love, and maybe euphoria and surprise. But we have we're disconsolate with sadness, and fear and anger cause us to act in many different ways than what we would normally do. Emotional mood contagion. And then we have emotion and mood contagion, excuse me, emotional labor, and then emotional dissonance. Emotional dissonance, and we talk about dissonance later, different thing, and it seems to me case 4 talks about dissonance. What we feel is not consistent with what we either do or what we are trying to have people believe about us. Emotion and mood contagion, notice that's a spillover effect, and that can cause some problems for us because we can't control those, and we push those out to somebody else. And so we want you to feel our emotions or our moods. Perhaps take it a step further. We want you to feel our pain. Now, is that going to make you feel any better? I don't think so. But you're just saying, okay, well, I want to share the wealth, if you will, with everybody else. And emotional labor relates, and I want to read this to you because it's very important to get this concept, relates to the need to show certain emotions in order to perform well on the job. I don't know that anybody would absolutely think about that, but perhaps that's true. Deep acting and surface acting. Trying to mollify, trying to modify, trying to ameliorate what we feel to make the situation and what we feel fit together. That's deep acting. Surface acting, notice here, is where hiding how we feel, but we're displaying something different. Display rules. Now, I think we can talk about this a little bit, and I'm not sure that I have a good answer to this. Whether or not it's right to display our emotions. Now, I think when you're talking about positive emotions, it's probably okay most of the time. There may be some situations when it should not be. I mean, you don't want to jump up and down about getting a promotion if 3 or 4 other people in that room were vying for the same promotion that you earned. And you probably want to stay away from that one. But most that are positive are probably okay to be shared. Most negative ones probably should not be shared. And the one I just mentioned, you're certainly going to have to be careful because you may have some people who are going to be really concerned about it. Well, this is a term that we talk about here about job satisfaction. And I really would prefer that this come a little bit later in the slideshow, if you will, because we actually talk about job performance and components of job satisfaction a little bit later. And so the slide probably was misplaced. And by the way, I don't have any way of changing these slides around. They come from the publisher, and so I get them the way they are. So what we might do here is we might come back to this slide, but notice what we're talking about here. We're talking about characteristics of the job, what goes on in a workplace here, talk about work events, daily hassles and daily uplifts. I would not say that those are work events. I would say that those are environmental events that affect what we're doing. Then how we react positively or negatively. Positively, we're going to have good job satisfaction. Also positively, we should have good job performance. And then, of course, how we handle things, what our personality is. Do we have a positive personality? Do we have a can-do personality? Do we have an openness to experience personality? We'll probably go forward in a positive manner to job satisfaction and job performance. Same way moods could. You know, if we're on a high, emotional high, a high mood, same thing. Negative, we're probably going to have just the reverse. So we'll talk a little bit about more about job satisfaction in a few minutes. All right. Attitude. This is, notice here what it says. We are predisposed to respond positively or negatively to someone or something within our environment. Within this, we have a cognitive component, an affective component, and a behavioral component. And you can see this, that we have a slide that we're going to come down to here in a second, figure 3.4, which is found on page 61 in the text. And it's probably a little bit better if we go to the slide than to pay a lot of attention to what we have here on this slide, because I think it'll show a lot better here for you. All right. So we know that what our cognition is. Cognition comes from our beliefs and our values. And then that cognition will create an effect, either positively or negatively, and it will have some kind of behavior. That effect will influence some type of behavior. So let's take our example down here at the bottom. And that is a person is working at a job and he has no responsibility, or she has no responsibility for anything or everything that goes on, and work is important to this person. Now, we don't talk about this in this course. We used to, but it's been dropped, and that's Theory X and Theory Y, David McGregor's work. And McGregor said that managers who are Theory Y managers realize that work is as important to people as is recreation and play and family life. And that work is not drudgery, which Theory X managers think. So here this person says, I like to work, but I have no responsibility. So that's his or her cognition. So he takes that to his or her effect and says, well, based upon what I have to say here, I don't like doing what I'm doing. I don't like my job because I'm not responsible for anything. Work, I like work, it's important, but what I do, there's no responsibility. So what's his or her behavior is going to be? Probably going to quit. Now, if in fact this person is really a good employee, which we can generate from he or she likes the responsibility, they ask for transfer. but probably won't, but may ask for a transfer. So go back to this attitude. We know is program, cognitive or facts. What we feel about the facts is the effect, and the behavior is what we're going to do. Here we are with cognitive dissonance, and what this simply says, this is inconsistency between our attitudes and behavior. So how can we fix this? Well, we can fix it by changing our attitude. We can change our future behavior, or we can develop a rationalization for explaining our inconsistency. Now, if we do that, we're just kidding ourselves. So let's just go back to cognitive dissonance and say the operative word about that is it is a disconnect. All right, now we're coming back to job satisfaction. This is how we feel about it. And if we have a positive feeling about the job and what we do and how we do it, and the responsibilities we have and authority and a few other things, we're going to have high job satisfaction. And job involvement just means, are we involved? It takes involvement a little bit further and talks about dedication. And I guess that if you want to look at it that way, they are synonymous. And if you're really involved with your job, I think you're probably dedicated and vice versa. I don't always think about it in that fashion, but I would tell you this. If you have high job satisfaction, you're going to be deeply embedded with your job, involved if you prefer, and then certainly be dedicated. Now, here we're talking about commitment here, and we have different types of commitment. We have organizational commitment, and that's if you want to stop and think about that, that's loyalty. How much am I committed to the organization and doing a good job because I understand what I'm supposed to do and how it fits in. Rational commitment. This really comes along with logic, if you will, things of that nature. And job serves its purposes, serves my economic purposes, development and professional purposes. So I've rationalized what the job does for me. Emotional commitment, I'm committed emotionally. I think that's pretty much too easy to say there. And employee engagement simply means, am I engaged in what I'm doing? And notice it talks about a strong sense of connection. And I think that's probably good, but I would like to say there's another thing here. And notice it says connection with the organization, but I would also like to extend that and say connection with the job. This is the Minnesota Satisfaction Questionnaire, and there's also one called the Job Descriptive Index. And they both address components of the job and components which make up job satisfaction. Managers ought to be concerned about this. There is a sample survey. I don't think you can just click on this and get it. And I don't remember if there's one that's listed here in the text about the Minnesota. Try to see if I can find that for you. I don't remember that being here, but it is possible that you can do that. All right, but let's look at what makes up the factors that make up job satisfaction. And you'll find this when we get to next week. we'll talk about Fred Hertzberg's theory. And I want you to think about what Fred Hertzberg says and how what these facets, of job satisfaction and how they relate to what Hertzberg's two-factor theory. Notice the top one is the job itself. If I have a job that challenges me and I have some authority and responsibility, I'm probably going to be satisfied. How well do I get along with my supervisor? Or he or she involved? Do they help me achieve what I need to achieve? Do I get along with the people I work with? Do I have opportunities for advancement? And then finally, am I rewarded satisfactorily with benefits and pay? People who are dissatisfied probably are going to be not only absent more frequently, but they're going to be turned over quickly. And so we really have a lot of problems when we have both absenteeism and high turnover, but also that's also linked to tardyism, which is not exactly absenteeism, but it's close to that. And what happens when you have a lot of that is you lose experience, and then you have to go through the whole recruiting process over again, which is expensive. It's expensive because your people sometimes are doing things they're not wouldn't be doing otherwise in the human resource management department. It's expensive to place ads. It's expensive then that once you have a pool of qualified candidates to bring them in, interview them, and things of that nature. So it's something we really have to pay a good deal of attention to. You have to be careful about absenteeism. Absenteeism can come from emotional distress. It can come from mood problems. It can come from stress. So you have to really pay a good deal of attention to what you have there. Organizational citizenship just means do you have a person who is committed to the organization? Is he or she willing to continue doing what they're going to do? And we want, these usually come with positive behaviors here, positive attitudes, both towards the job and to the organization. And this person is going to give extra, and he or she is going to help other employees to achieve and succeed. The relationship between job satisfaction and job performance has three theories. Satisfaction causes performance, performance causes satisfaction, and then rewards cause satisfaction and performance. Now let's look at these theories. Now, if we espouse this first one, that satisfaction causes performance, managers need to work with employees to keep them satisfied. The old saw is that a happy employee will be a high performer. What says down here at the bottom of the job satisfaction is not a consistent predictor of high performance. So then we go to the next one. Performance causes satisfaction. And what we find here is that managers should try to keep performance high because that's the direct path to good satisfaction, high satisfaction. And that better performance leads to more rewards and maybe greater chances of promotion, which is a reward in a way, and a few other things. But notice down here at the bottom, performance leads to satisfaction only if rewards are seen as fair and equitable. We talk about the equity theory in chapter 6. So what this is saying is that if the rewards are seen as being what they ought to be, then okay. But if they're not, then there's going to be a downside. And this is the equity theory again, which we're going to talk about a little bit more when we get to chapter 6. Here's performance. Here's the rewards. Go to satisfaction. So we have some other type things we want to talk about. But I want to talk more about equity theory when we talk about what Adams had to say about it. And again, it's in chapter 6. But as long as the rewards are values, says it's going to lead to satisfaction. And then here's the last. Rewards cause both satisfaction and performance. So if that's true, then we need to make sure that we have the right rewards, that they're allocated the correct way. And then if we do that, it's going to improve both performance and satisfaction. Talks about maybe the size of the reward. I think we have a lot of problems with that, and Hertzberg would not agree with this. So we get a chance to look and see what Hertzberg says next week when we get to the first of our theories on motivation. Now, here's the last thing we're going to talk about tonight, and it's something that you can think about and decide for yourself. If you won the lottery, would you ever work again? Consider what we get from work. We can identify with what we do. We have accomplishment, we have achievement, we have relationships, so how would we do without that? What will we do to replace that? I don't have the answer to that, and I don't expect you to have the answer to it. If you want to think about that and maybe post something in the forum section, please do that. But I think it's an interesting question. We are at 6:45, and chapter 3 always takes a much shorter time. It took us about a half an hour. I apologize for the late start tonight. I had some technical difficulties for which I could not figure out. So I thank you for your attendance, and I will again have this posted in Campus Web tomorrow morning. Thank you. I look forward to speaking with you next week, and good night.